Give me one moment. Okay, we are now being recorded, and you should see me appearing in the large box, and I'll introduce the section very quickly because I don't want to take up any more time. I wanted to introduce Rabbi Yaakov Feldman, who is going to be doing, and hopefully everybody has those dates. And we're going to start in just a moment. You can ask questions through the chat box function, which is on your screen. If you're having trouble, you can email me at jeff@mussarinstitute.org. I have my email open, and I'll try to help you out if you're having any problems. Rabbi Feldman has been teaching for many years, has been teaching for the Mussar Institute. He's appeared at our annual Kallah, and he's a wonderful teacher who I know you will enjoy learning with. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Rabbi Feldman, and I am going to mute myself so that you'll be the only one hopefully appearing in the box.
Okay, Jeff. Hi, everybody. If you can see me or hear me, I hope so. I don't know if I'm appearing large enough for you to see, okay? Nice to see you. I'm Rabbi Yaakov Feldman. Greetings to everybody. We're going to be close to 200 folks together in the course of this series. In 4 classes, one tonight, one next week with a break of 1 week. And we'll get together for 2 weeks after that. Okay, can everyone see me? Can everyone hear me? I'm expecting as much. Okay. Good to meet you. A bunch of us met together at the Kallah and at other occasions as well, and it's a pleasure to be back with the Mussar Institute folks. You're always very receptive and perceptive, so it's a pleasure. Okay, you'll see something written on your whiteboard. We're not going to get to that yet, okay? Now, we're going to discuss several things. First, I want to touch upon the fact that your having been born was statistically improbable, okay? In terms of the particular sperm and egg conjoining together, the chances of that were statistically improbable. So your having been born is miraculous to begin with, okay? Now, the Zohar talks a lot about the experience of the soul before coming into the world, and it likens it to the experience of Abraham before he came into the land of Israel, okay? So Abraham was told by God to leave his father's house, his birthplace, and where he came from. So the Zohar relates that to the soul, which has to leave God's house, which is to say the free world, okay, and comes into this world. Now, so you're here. Now, this life, as you all know, is complex, full of all kinds of experience, many positive, many unfortunately negative. So we're going to touch upon all that, if we can, in the course of this session. Now, the obvious question is, what has this to do with Mussar? Okay? So, to be a student of Mussar, you have to be introspective, okay? You have to know who you are, where you're going, and where you're bound to be eventually. In other words, you have to have a good head on your shoulders, okay? I'm not talking about intellect, I'm talking about insight. So, given that it's highly improbable that you would have been born, but you had that pre-birth experience we alluded to earlier on, and given that life is complex, and given that life has its good moments and its bad moments, it behooves us, the students of Mussar, to know what it's all about. So some of you might have joined me in the past. We talked about death before. As many of you know, I am a hospital rabbi, okay? I work with the dying and unfortunately the dead as well, and I work with families, and I work with people who are delivered from death, people who seem to be approaching death, were swept away perhaps at the last moment or less dramatically in the course of time. All right, so here, this is what we're going to touch on. So I deal with this practically every single day. Death is a living reality. If you work in a hospital, you work as a physician or whatever, someone in that position as a nurse, death is always there. It's not an elephant hidden in the room. It's an elephant in full sight in the room. Okay? So death is real. Suffering is real. Now, so to be a student of Mussar, to be a successful student of Mussar, you have to be in touch with that. Even the cleanup crew in the hospitals, all right, even the people who transport people in their beds around the hospital, perhaps from one room to another, one unit to another, we're all in touch with death. We see people in terrible pain. We see people in suffering. Sometimes it's a very unpleasant experience. So death is a given in the hospital. Okay? So here's what we're going to touch on in the next four sessions, please God. Okay, number one, this session tonight and next week, it's referred to as On Death and Beyond. We're going to talk there about, we're going to touch upon 5 particular themes. Number one, the moment's close to death. Number 2 is after death. Number 3 is the Garden of Eden or heaven. Number 4 is Gehenna or hell. Number 5 is reincarnation. Okay, those are the themes that we're going to be talking about near death and after death. We will probably not get to hell tonight, which is a good thing, okay? We're probably going to get to hell next time, but we're probably not going to touch on hell this week whatsoever. I don't think we'll have the time. All right, so then we'll take a break. So that's this week and next week, right? And we're going to touch upon, again, the moment close to death, the moment of death, the Garden of Eden, and if we have time, and I don't expect we will, hell and reincarnation. Okay? We're going to be bringing traditional Jewish sources for this, okay? From the Talmud, the Midrash, the Zohar, the Kabbalists, etc. This is not going to be an academic course. I'm not just going to be giving over data, you understand? I'm going to be giving you now teachings that were revealed to high souls, okay? Great sages and great mystics. Now, after that session of this week and next week, again, we'll take a break of 1 week, and then we'll talk about the death of the universe. Because not only do you and I, unfortunately, suffer death of the body, but the world and the universe itself suffers the death of the body. Okay? The world will itself end. Okay? The world will itself die. And we're going to touch upon this pre-death period, which is analogous to what we're going to touch on this week and next week. When the world is close to death, that's referred to as the Messianic period. Mashiach will have come. Number 2, we'll touch upon the day of judgment. Number 3, we'll touch upon resurrection of the dead. And number 4, we'll touch upon the world to come. Okay? That's these next 2 sessions. That's this week and next week. I was wrong about the timing, right? That's the first 2 sessions. Then we're going to take a break. Then we're going to go on to suffering. Okay? We're going to transcend death and go on to suffering. Now, whereas this session and next week's session is going to be not academic, really, it'll be more academic, though, than the last 2 sessions. The last 2 sessions on suffering, I really want you to bring in your personal experience, okay? I really want you to bring in your questions and your own insights. I dare say each one of you has suffered, okay? I dare say each one of you has been scared witless at a point or 2 in your life. And I dare say that each one of you has had your faith tested. No one has not had their faith tested, I dare say. Okay? Some succeeded that test, some do not, frankly. But we're going to touch upon all that stuff. Those last 2 weeks we're going to study from the book of Ecclesiastes and the book of Job. The book of Ecclesiastes has been written by King Solomon according to the tradition. The book of Job was either written by Job himself, but there are major opinions in the tradition that Job, as a person, didn't exist. Job was a metaphor. In fact, there's an opinion amongst our sages that the book of Job was written by Moses. We're not going to touch upon that so much. This is not going to be an academic approach to the study of these two books of the Torah, of Tanakh. We're going to be approaching it from an experiential aspect, okay? So when we touch upon Ecclesiastes or Kohelet in Hebrew, it's very depressing sometimes, frankly. He raises very difficult questions. Is life absurd? He raises the question. Ecclesiastes does. And our very last of these 4 sessions will be from the book of Job. Again, Job is a book that was written by the man named Job, who was either Jewish or not. The tradition is not clear about that. He might very well have been a non-Jew, but we accept his words. And we're going to talk about, because Job had a very rough life. He had a very rough life. He had terrible sorrows, troubles, okay? And no one would want to live the kind of life that he lived. And we're going to see how he struggled with that. And struggle is the word because, in fact, he almost lost it a couple of times here. You know, he almost lost his faith altogether. He almost blew it totally, almost gave up on it all. And I dare say there are 1 or 2 of you out there, too, who have almost given up on it all, too. That's twice in your experience. So if you're going to be reticent to talk about your experience, okay, feel free. But I really encourage you to talk about your experience in pain or suffering, too. If you have questions, or if you want to raise scenes, or you just want to throw out 2 or 3 words in the chat room in my direction, feel free. Okay? That's what we're going to be covering for the next 4 sessions. These first 2 this week, and next week will be on death and beyond, and the break. And we'll have 2 sessions on suffering from the book of Ecclesiastes, the book of Job. Okay. Now you'll see you have a whiteboard, right? You've probably been looking at it for like 10, 15 minutes now. We're going to touch on death. Let's see. What is death all about? Suppose you're having this transcendent peak experience we have on the whiteboard. I don't know if you all have that whiteboard. I'm assuming you do. If you don't, no big deal. Imagine yourself having a transcendent peak experience. Suppose you're studying something very deep in a holy text, right? Suppose you're ruminating about God. Suppose you're in front of a vast scene of nature. Suppose you're in love. Suppose you've had a baby, right? All of these transcendent peak experiences. Now, how would you describe that experience? I'm going to give you a minute or 2 to think about this, okay? If you want to type it in, do. If you want to type it into the chat room, that would be great. Now, I put down 4 ways of experiencing that. When you have a transcendent experience, you're either going to melt like butter, right? You're going to dissolve in 1 of 2 ways. You're either going to dissolve like sugar in water, or you're going to dissolve, for example, like blue coloring in water. 2 very different sorts of dissolutions there. Or you're going to be transported. All right. Give yourself 30 or 60 seconds to think about that. What's your experience of a transcendent peak experience? If you want to type in a word or 2 or a sentence in the chat room, that would be great. Don't forget you're having a transcendent peak experience. You either get the impression that you're melting, you're dissolving like salt or sugar in water, or you're dissolving like color into water, blue color, red color, whatever. or you're being transported. I see, okay, clarity. You're experiencing clarity, you're experiencing humility, you're dissolved, okay? It's Miriam Bhatia, okay? Give you another 30 seconds or so. Calm. Again, you're studying something intensely deep, or you're reflecting about God, or you're in front of an intense scene in nature, or you're listening to opera, or you're seeing a great painting, or you're in love, or you've had a baby. Jeff, elevated, I think, is the same as transported, wouldn't you say? Okay. Part of Hashem. Connected. Okay. There's no right and wrong answer, of course, but I want to suggest that if you're melting, okay, you're still remaining in place. If you're dissolving, like salt or sugar in water, you're still remaining in place and you have a presence there, okay? You make the water salty or sweet, or you make it appear a different color, if we're talking about a blue color or red color in water. But if you're transported, by definition, you're elsewhere. You're not affecting the thing itself. So according to the tradition, death is transportation, okay? You're not melting. You're not dissolving. You are transported elsewhere, okay? Now, it doesn't end there. Once you're transported, what's it like, okay? So that's the trip. That explains the trip. You're transported. I dare say, and I have to suggest this, I don't know this whatsoever, I dare say that then, after you're transported, you're either melting or dissolving, okay? In other words, the self that is you is transported elsewhere. You're having this transcendent peak experience, right? You're dying. The self, the ego, is transported elsewhere. It's out of the picture. I mean, God forbid, I see this. I see cadavers. And it's someone you might have spoken to 10 minutes before. Literally. And they're not there. They're not there. They are transported. They haven't melted. They haven't dissolved, right? They're gone. The body, right, eventually will melt or it will dissolve, right? But the body will not be transported. I mean, it'll be moved into the ground, okay, but it won't be transported into another realm, right? All right, so here you are. The Jewish take on it is that you are transported when you die. The ego is transported when it dies, okay? When you die. The body remains, but the ego goes elsewhere. It's transported. We'll explain the difference where you're transported. That's touching upon heaven and hell, etc. And the moment before death and during death, we'll get to that soon enough. But once you are transported, right? Okay? This is conjecture. It seems to me that's when you begin to melt. Someone asked a question. Sippy Marks Barnett asked, ego or the soul? Good question. Good question. Both are right. Okay? There are 5 parts to the soul. Okay? The lowest most part is the nefesh, which is akin to the ego. Okay, Sippy, good point. The lowest most part of the soul is akin to the ego. It's referred to as the nefesh. Higher than that is what we refer to as the ruach. Higher than that is what's referred to as the neshama. These are all souls, okay? But there are degrees. Higher than the neshama, which is the usual Jewish term for the soul, is the chaya. Highest most of all is the Yechidah, which is Yachad, which is at one with God, together with God. That's a thing unto itself. Simply great question. It's given me nachas, okay? I appreciate that, but it explains many things, but it's kind of going to lead us astray. But it's a good point. The ego is the lowest part of the soul, but a part of the soul. It's a good point. Okay. Anyway, after you will have been transported, right? After the nefesh, etc., will have been transported, right? There, to my mind, is an experience of melting or dissolving. Okay? Then the ego, ergo, the neshama, nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida, starts to melt, to dissolve, okay, in the ways we explained. I'm interested in getting your reaction to this. What's your take on it? Does that give you comfort, or does it not? In fact, does it give you discomfort? I'll give some time for you guys to respond, if you will. Comfort, okay, thank you. Not coming across probably. Some of both, comforting, yes. Deep sense of comfort, okay. Interesting, okay. So you understand, thank you now, this is all a dissolution of the self. When you have these peak transcendent moments, you lose yourself all the time. You experience it all the time. Whenever somebody goes to you, hello, are you there? Are you there? I'm not talking about sleep, but if you're just meandering in your mind, okay, concentrating upon your studies, lost in your work, whatever it is, this is the transcendence as well. This is the transportation. Okay? If you're a great artist, you're transported into the scene. If you're a writer, you're transported into the scene, right? If you're a composer, you're transported into the notes, etc., etc., etc. Okay? All right. So that dissolution of the self is this transportation of the self is a death experience. Where you go is what we're going to touch upon. That's when you begin to melt and or to dissolve at different points, and I dare say you get yourself back, okay? The melting experience stops and you start to congeal, and rather than dissolving, the salt or the coloring settles to the bottom of the glass, if you will, and has the density again. There's no clear response to this is my take on it, according to my understanding and my reading. But I just want you to consider the ramifications of this. This is at bottom the death process. I'm hearing somebody's voice there. Someone please shut your microphone off. I appreciate that. Okay. So this is the death experience. Okay. Any questions now before we get into the data? Okay, apparently not. All right, here's the thing. The tradition tells us, and this is based upon the Exodus Rabbah, which is a Midrash, right? And it goes like this. One great person says that he knew when he was about to depart from this world, he knew all the good things that were stored for him in the afterlife, right? This is from Exodus Rabbah, and from Sifri, which is basically contemporary with the Midrash. Someone also says that they envisioned their place in the afterlife. Now, I've been with people before they pass away. Okay? It's a very intense moment. It's very holy, I dare say. And you don't talk about the weather. You really don't. So some people can see something off in the distance, okay? So I've had people describe, and there's literature about this. Okay, I'm not talking about end-of-life experiences where people write books about this. I hold that's legitimate. I hold it's legitimate. I just hold it's a different take on things. Some part, I wouldn't say disingenuous, but misunderstood or ill-advised. Okay, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are approaching death, not dead clinically, but approaching death. And they tell me of an experience of approaching a ladder. Okay? Where people see things off in the distance. Well, they see members of their family too. We'll touch upon that soon now. But they experience things, okay? I have had people who experience things that they expected to happen afterwards, okay? Someone's asking a good question. You say the ego transports and there's a destination that the ego goes to. Is it the same for everyone? What determines it? No, it's not the same for everybody. There is a heaven and hell. We have a different take on it. What determines it is the kind of person you were in this life, and that's it. A bond. The kind of person you've been in this life. Heaven and hell are weighty terms because they have a decidedly un-Jewish ring to them. Be it Christian, be it Buddhist, etc. There are terms out there in the world, okay, Shinto, there are terms out there in the world about heaven and hell, which is totally irrelevant to our belief system. Our belief system is fully evolved, and it has width and depth and length, but it's not like other systems, okay? We contend that there's a whole different way of experiencing that. Okay. Another question that you said before death itself dissolves later after transmutation. Is the soul eternal? The soul is definitely eternal. The experience of the soul might not be eternal. You hear what I'm saying? Does the soul experience itself as separate from its surroundings, right? I don't know. I tend to think not. But that's not right away. Right away the soul is definitely in touch with itself. The soul is eternal, and when it passes, and for the first year or more, it experiences itself individually, and perhaps does no longer. Okay? It perhaps no longer experiences itself as an autonomous entity, but it is still eternal. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't disappear into nothingness, okay? There is heaven, the Garden of Eden, we'll talk about that, but the soul doesn't experience itself as the soul, okay? It experiences what is around it, and it itself does melt or dissolve after the first year or so, and there's a reason I'm saying year. Okay, good question. That was from Barry. All right. So that's experience before death. Now, this is close to death. Now, the angel of death approaches you, okay? Now, what's referred to as the Mussar, the angel of death. Now, you die because you're brought to death by the angel of death. Now, I've been called the angel of death, by patients. They say, get out of here, you're the angel of death, which is a little off-putting. Believe me, I don't do anything whatsoever about the angel of death, but I've been called that. One of the most off-putting experiences in all my chaplain career. Okay. But there is an angel of death, and the Talmud talks about this in Tractate of Zohar, page 20b. Angel of death is full of eyes, right? When he sees a person about to depart, I'm quoting now, he stands above the head, a pillow with his sword drawn out of his hand, a drop of gall, of sour, bitter gall, hangs from the end of his sword. The sick person beholds it, he trembles, opens his mouth in fright. He, the angel of death, then drops the gall into the sick person's mouth. From this that he does, from this that the corpse deteriorates, from this the face becomes greenish. If you've seen a corpse, and I've seen 20, 25 corpses, I've conducted about 100 funerals. You don't see all the corpses, of course, but there is a greenish tinge. a greenish-grayish tinge. If you've ever seen a cadaver, it's greenish-grayish. It's mostly gray, but there is a greenish tinge to it. So, of course, it's obviously a white person. A black person, I frankly have never seen a black corpse. I really can't speak to that. I've never seen anything other than a white corpse. In my experience, I can't speak to that. But, I work with Jewish patients, so that explains that. Sardima, darker skin, but I don't recall an experience along those lines. Okay. So, all right, so when a man is on his deathbed, this is a quote now from the Zohar. Yeah, this is a quote now from the Zohar. When a man lies on his deathbed and judgment rests upon him, decreeing that he should leave this world, it's granted an additional supernal spirit that he never had before, which is to say he's granted an insight that he never had before. And when this dwells with him and cleaves to him, he sees that he has never been worshipped, never been worthy enough to see throughout his life, because the additional spirit has now been given to him. He sees or she sees things he or she was never able to get before. You get it. You start to finally get it. Okay? It all comes together and starts to make sense. And once this has been granted him or her, and that person sees, he or she departs from the world. That's from the Zohar. Okay. Now, this is after, okay, this is still before, let's say the first moments of death. Now, these books that talk about near-death experiences, they are legitimate. I have met people who have come back after having been clinically dead. They have talked to me about the experience. I've read about the experience. I have a friend who has written a book about the experience, has done a lot of research with it, with Jewish sources and non-Jewish sources together. And many of the things come together. Many of the things work in parallel, the Jewish system and non-Jewish system, with the near-death experience. It's a whole other kettle of fish. We're not going to get into that now. It's worth reading about. Some of it's garbage. A lot of it is not garbage. Some of it sells very well and it's honest. Some of it sells very well and it's dishonest. My take on it is, though, that you're not going to have eyes, right, when you're dead and you're going through a, quote, near-death experience when you actually are clinically dead, but you come back. Those who have been on the other side speak of what things they saw and they heard. Now, of course, you don't have eyes, you don't have ears. So what can see, what can hear? So what you do it's my conjecture that when a person passes away, they have a sense of, an intuitive sense of things as they are, as we learned before. We have a new level, deeper level of understanding. So we don't see things down there. We don't hear things up there, right? In there. We get it. But when they want to say they saw this or they saw that, perhaps they're just, this is just conjecture on their part, because again, there are no eyes, there are no ears to report that. But once they come back into the world, those who do come back and report what they, quote, saw and what they heard, are reporting it through the experience of people who will hear and see. Okay, understand what I'm saying? So they're not really experiencing what they're saying. They experience something else and they say it the way they experience things in this world. This is a technical point. But, okay, one of the things that people report when they have this, quote, near-death experience is that they see God, or they see a great warm and comforting light. Okay? Somebody asked for the Zohar, the source of the Zohar. Barry Weinstein asked for a quote from the Zohar, the one that talks about man is deathbed having insight. The Zohar, section 1, page 218. B, Barry. So that's where that comes from, okay? We're now going to touch upon the Zohar, section 1, page 57b. Barry, okay, good. So, The Zohar now says in section 157b, no one leaves the world without first seeing Adam. In other words, the first instance of death, right? The first moment of transportation, we see Adam. To my mind, this is what people experience as, quote, seeing God, or, quote, seeing a warm and comforting and all-accepting, all-loving light. Adam and Eve are our parents, okay? Alta Zaidi, Alta Bubba, they're the elders way back there, and we are their kids. So, of course, there's going to be a lot of warmth, there's going to be a lot of acceptance, okay? There's going to be a lot of love, but they're not seeing God, they're seeing Adam. You will see God, but not right away. Not right away. You will experience God. Again, I have trouble using the word see because you don't have eyes. You will experience God. You will sense the experience of God, but you won't see God. Again, you will experience the presence of Adam. Okay? And that is perhaps the warm light and God that people refer to when they speak about the near-death experiences. And the Zohar says, Barry, in section 3, page 53a, when a person, I'm going to quote now, when a person on the point of leaving this world, his soul suffers many chastisements along with his body. In other words, there's pains and there's anguish before they separate. Nor does the soul actually leave until the Shekhinah shows itself to him, and then the soul goes out in joy and love to meet the Shekhinah. Okay, Shekhinah is the divine presence. It's known mistakenly as the female aspect of God, but that God has neither male nor female aspects to God. Okay? We use the word him if I lapse into pronouns, if I lapse into male pronouns just by force of habit. God is bodiless. God is not a human being. God doesn't look like anything. God has neither gender nor anything whatsoever identifiable as human whatsoever. We're running out of time, guys. We've got to cover some ground, but it's a good question I see here from Jim. How do you differentiate between a genuine spiritual experience and a hallucination? If you took your meds that morning, it's a genuine experience. I'm just joking. It's hard. It's hard. There's a fine line between hallucination and spiritual insight. And there's a fine line between high peak artistic experience and prophetic reality and insanity. Okay? It's a hard call to make. There's certain, if you've been around psychotics, and I've been around psychotics too, or highly neurotic individuals, there's a difference one can tell. Okay? There's a difference between, I'm not just talking about being stable, I'm not just talking about being logical, but there's a certain, I can't put it in words. One sees it, when one sees it, one knows it, okay? Another question, can't we find the source but have just read in the basic readings from the Kabbalah edited by, who's that? Gershon Shalom, right. I mean, that's a very slim work, okay? The work by Gershon Shalom on the basic readings of the Zohar is probably, 100 pages or something like that? So you won't find it there. There's something called the Wisdom of the Zohar, which is available in English in 3 thick tomes, which is like $120, $150 for the set, but it's well worth it. The original Zohar in Aramaic and Hebrew is delicious. But you have to put decades into study into it, as I have done. I study Torah just about every single day, and it's just delicious, it's wonderful. But to go back to the question that was raised before, is it delusionary, is it mad, or is it prophetic insight and experience? It's a hard call to make, but there are certain indications, physical indications, and emotive indications as well. I'm afraid we're running out of time. Okay. Then, again, you're approached by the angel of death. We touched upon that already, right? That's from the Zohar. No, I'm sorry. We're reading from the Zohar now. chapter, part 3, pages 126A to 127A. I'm just going to read a part of it. His spirit moves through every part of the body and asks leave. It says, see you foot, see you hand. Please forgive me, I'm leaving now, the soul. Okay? Asking, as if asking a friend for permission to go to another place. Okay? The person is afraid and tries to hide, but he cannot. When he sees it's impossible, he opens his eyes and has to look on him, looks upon him with open eyes, and then he surrenders his body and his soul. Okay? This is Zohar, part 1, page 217. B. Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi Isaac, have you seen today the image of your Father? We have learned. At the hour of a man's departure from the world, his father and relatives gather around him and see them and recognize them. I've seen this. I've seen this before people passed away. They said, Rabbi, don't think I'm crazy. My mother appeared to me last night. My grandmother appeared to me last night. Okay? I've heard this from simple individuals who don't have experience reading the literature of what's out there. They've never heard the stuff I just cited now from the Zohar. They're not sophisticated oftentimes enough to have read near-death experiences. Okay? Well, hold on. What's this, Barry? Another experience, there is no death without sin. All right, we're going to touch upon heaven and hell, Barry. Well said. Well, a point well made. But we'll get to that. I see, not only we're not getting to hell tonight, we're probably not even getting to heaven yet. Okay, all right, so one will have died at this point. Again, I've been told by patients, I've seen my mother last night, my sister came to me from the other side, and the patient will be very emotional. They will feel comforted by that, or they will have been told it's not your time yet, and they'll come back, or they will have been accepted in loving arms by deceased individuals who passed before they did. I've seen people talk about this with my own eyes. I've heard it with my own ears. Okay? Now, after the moment of death, most forms of death come, God forbid, in the form of choking. The easiest is, quote, is death by the kiss. Okay? The holy ones of Tzaddikim are said to die by death of a kiss. Okay? God kisses them on the cheek and they go. Okay? That's from the Talmud, from Brachot, page 8a. We're told here's an interesting quote. The experience of death, according to our rabbis in the Midrash, Ecclesiastes, Rabbah, is like swirling waters through a channel. And it's very picturesque, isn't it? It's like seeing swirling waters through a channel. The soul just descends and ascends. It just whirls around like that. Very picturesque. Rabbi Shmuel said like a moist and inverted thorn tearing its way out of the throat. That's a little disturbing. Okay? And then we're told that right. One has a panoramic vision of the deeds of his or her life. So one goes through a life review. Okay? One goes through a life review. I haven't seen much literature about this in those who come back from being clinically dead. Okay? Near-death experiences don't speak about life reviews other than once in a while, to my experience. I haven't read all the works whatsoever. But there is a life review that occurs right after death. And the soul keeps returning to the grave for the first 3 days after its demise. The soul returns from the grave to the house where people are sitting shiva for it. It gets confused. It thinks it's still alive, but then it goes to its grave and it realizes that it belongs there. It goes back to the shiva house. It goes for the first 3 days, then it goes to that first. And we're taught by the Pittet of Rabbi Yaakov chapter 30. For all the 7 days of mourning, the Shiva, the soul goes back and forth and returns from its former home to its burial ground. Okay? It's just not used to being dead yet. So the whole Shiva period there, when we sit Shiva for the week, in a way we're anchoring the soul on the other side. We're showing we're still here. It's okay. The world is still here. You're not here anymore. It's okay. You go home now. Okay? You belong in heaven. Okay? You go home now. We're anchoring this world down. Okay? All right. We've covered a lot of ground tonight. All right? We've covered the fact that, according to the Jewish experience, Jewish understanding of the death experience, one is transported rather than melts or dissolves. Dissolves either like salt or sugar in water, or dissolves like coloration in water. The difference being is that when one dissolves like salt in water, one adds one's own flavor to the water, right? And one dissolves like blue drops of coloring into water, or red drops of coloring in water, one changes the very experience of the water itself. But we say no. When one dies, one dissolves. One transports. One is transported. One's being. Rabbi Yaakov once said the experience of dying is like going from one room to the other. They're radically different rooms, of course, but there's different realms, okay? So, you can go up from 8 p.m. if you want. That's strange because it's 8:51 already. Thanks to Jeff. Okay. I want to wrap up, though, that, right. So, I want to wrap up, though, and say that according to Judaism, the ego is real, okay? The soul is real. The ego, once again, is the lowest level of the soul. The two extremes, lowest, highest, right? The lowest level is the ego. The highest is the one that is together with God. There's a vast difference between them. A vast difference between them. So that's the two extremes. The lowest level of the soul is the nefesh, the ego. It's the one that experiences death. The highest level of the soul doesn't experience death. It doesn't understand life. It's just like life is out of its experience. Just as death is out of our experience for the most part every single day. Life is out of the experience of the highest level of the soul, but that's besides the point. So we see that the Jewish experience, the Jewish religion talks about the experience of death as being one of transportation. There is an ego that remains. There is a sense of one's self that remains. There's a sense of one's self that's transported. Okay? The ego does neither melt nor dissolve at first. The ego stays intact. Okay? I, Yaakov Feldman, inside the body, right, remain intact. The body dissolves. The body melts. Okay? But I, the ego, the self that I experience today, remains. It occurs to me something's going on here. There's a change. I will have moved to a whole other realm. I experience that. I don't see it. I don't hear it, but I experience it. I know it in my heart. Maybe that's the best way to put it, but that still has nomenclature, which is problematic to our experience. But anyway, the ego is still there. The ego still realizes it exists. It feels for self. I once had a wonderful patient who had a near-death experience. And he realized he was going through this tunnel, you know, and he realized that he was flying, that something was saying, this isn't normal. And he had had a thumb missing. He had had an accident when he was a kid. So he said, hold on. And he looked, and his thumb was missing. He said, this is me. Okay? He didn't have a body anymore. Right? He was clinically dead. He was disattached from his body. Right? But he was still there. So this individual was moving around, transported elsewhere. He didn't melt. He didn't dissolve. His body, had he died, his body would have melted, would have dissolved. By the way, I said to him afterwards, and he had a terrible disease. I said to him, and he came back. This happened to him 20 years before I met him, or some other event, right? I said to him 20 years later when I first met him, what's your sense of death? He says, I'm not afraid of it at all. Not afraid of it at all. I don't want it, but I'm not afraid of it at all. That's what he told me. And that's the experience of most people who have near-death experiences. And there's a lot of legitimate scientific research into this now. There are certain physicians that are working with this on projects, and it's just very exciting work, very exciting work. Any doctor or nurse worth his or her weight in gold knows these experiences, okay? They know these things happen. It's not every day in every career, okay? At least one time. Anyway, so the Jewish take on it is that the self is transported. It's transported to another level of existence where it first sees Adam, right? And it's welcomed home from the other side by Adam and by one's own grandmother, grandfather, etc., on the other side, one who will have predeceased him, okay? The Jewish experience is we didn't even get to heaven tonight. We're going to get, please God, next we're going to get to heaven together. We're going to touch upon the Jewish view of the Garden of Eden or of heaven, and the Jewish view of hell or Gehenna. The Jewish view of hell, in short, is short-lived. You're not there forever. A non-Jewish view is once you're damned, you're damned. 99.5% of humanity will only be in hell's tops for a year. That small percentage, right? Like Hitler, my third grade teacher. People evil like that will be there forever. Okay? All right, I wish you all well. Your questions have been great. Feel free to ask questions next week. Next week, again, we'll touch upon the Garden of Eden, Gehenna, which is the gist of the afterlife, and reincarnation. We do believe in reincarnation, okay? I thank you all. Please, God will be together next week. Have a good week.